One match that I think TNA should definitely do, and I'm sure they're going to do it at some point, would be Austin Aries versus AJ Styles. I just think, you've got two top talents in the company, two very athletic, cruiserweight, X Division-esque type of talents that TNA fans are really into, very familiar with, and they've never really crossed paths in TNA. I know they wrestled a couple of times when Aries was there the first time, but nobody remembers any of those matches, and it wasn't when Aries was a big deal. Here, you've got Aries as one of the top stars in the company, and you have AJ who's the face of the company, and I'm thinking, that'd be a nice pairing to have. So that's definitely a match I would, if not for Bound for Glory, I would certainly save it, I guess for a rainy day or something. It's like as a big build-up, and the match be a big payoff at some pay-per-view at some point, because I do think it would be a really cool match to do. Oh god, this is another one that could be a whole video unto itself. I mean, I could sit here all day and talk about the balls dropped by both WWE and TNA. A couple that immediately come to mind for TNA for me, number one is Monty Brown. I mean, there's a guy who wasn't the most talented in-ring worker. I mean, let's get that out of the way. He wasn't that good in the ring. But you had a character that got over, you had some obvious charisma there, and you had a guy with some crossover appeal giving his NFL background that probably could have led to TNA getting some wider attention elsewhere. I don't know. And the guy got over. I mean, it's one of those things I'll just never understand why his push turned out the way it did. I knew they fucked him over the second they turned him heel. I was like, okay, you have this guy get over as a major babyface, and then you turn him heel. And the problem with turning him heel is that he's not going to eclipse Jeff Jarrett as top heel. So that basically just fucked him over. I don't know if that was by design or what the idea was, but it was really, I mean, wow, you had a guy that was just mad over, that was generating buzz and attention for your company, and he just failed horribly. And it all came down to the booking and the way he was booked, and that heel turn did it. That heel turn definitely did it. Another one I felt TNA really fucked up with was Samoa Joe versus Kurt Angle. I felt like that was a match they could have built up over the course of a year. And when they did the first segment with the headbutt, if I were booking, I would have said, okay, that's your moment, that's your introduction, let's not do the match for a year. I would have held that sucker off until Bound for Glory the next year and reaped the benefits of it. I mean, it was obviously a match that the fan base was excited about, that generated some buzz and attention because of Kurt Angle's departure from WWE and heading over to TNA, which was a shock to a lot of people. They definitely had something there, and you had two very interesting and unique talents meshing for the first time. It was something, and also you had Samoa Joe on his undefeated streak, which was, is always a great thing for a character to have. And I would have been tempted to keep Samoa Joe undefeated all the way until he faced Angle at Bound for Glory 07, just to see if we could do it. If I were booking, yeah, I mean, you could always have an Angle like cost him the streak or something along the way, and without giving the match away or something. But I definitely would have built that match up over the course of a year. I think it should have been a major main event for TNA, and they just rushed it and blew it off first month right out of the gun. And I said it when they did it. I'm like, that's a huge mistake. Huge mistake. You had a match that people wanted to see and were willing to crawl across broken glass to see. Of course, I'm exaggerating, but and you just blew it. You blew it. You got to cultivate it and nurture it and build into it. You can't just throw it out there before it's had time to gestate. You just can't do that. And they didn't really get a whole lot out of that. I think they got an initial pay-per-view buy rate bump, and that was it. They could have, if they had actually taken the time to build it up step by step over the course of a year, I would venture to say it would have yielded much greater results. I remember when they had their match at Lockdown 08, I think it was, and that match felt big because they built that match up over the course of 4 or 5 months. And a friend of mine was like, man, this match feels big. And I'm sitting there thinking, yeah, could you imagine how big it would feel if this were the first time they faced each other? It's just one of those things that wasn't meant to be, and TNA's rushing really fucked that up. And going into WWE, major balls dropped. I mean, I guess we could throw CM Punk in there. a couple of times. His run in '09 when he was the heel, I mean, he should have held the belt all the way until Mania. Absolutely should have held the belt all the way until Mania, and they had all that heat built into it. There was no reason not to keep the belt on him all the way until WrestleMania, except that Undertaker needed the belt for some reason, and we just went right back to the boring status quo, and Taker got a title reign that ultimately amounted to nothing, and there was no artistic reason to do it. It was just stupid. It was bad, and then of course, the whole hype they had surrounding his departure from the WWE in 2011. Once again, they jumped the gun. They they brought him back way too soon. I knew that was a problem. They kind of fucked the whole thing over from there. They could have gotten so much out of Punk just not being part of the company. Like the stuff they were doing with him, like, busting Triple H's balls at Comic-Con and going on Twitter and posting pictures of the WWE title in the refrigerator. And they had a lot of cool things that they could have done. And the specter of CM Punk would have been a cool thing to kind of haunt the show and change the personality of the show without him actually being there. Because, we would have seen a WWE in a long-term stretch living with the ramifications of what CM Punk did at Money in the Bank. And it just didn't happen. And then, of course, they brought him back too soon, and then he drops the title to Alberto Del Rio, which, had to happen. Then he loses to Triple H, and by the time it was, there was Kevin Nash got involved, and that ultimately amounted to nothing, and then Johnny Ace becomes the bad guy because that needs to happen, and ultimately it just went right back to typical WWE stuff, when it should have been something that could have changed the entire company in major ways, from their presentation to the style of storytelling to the personality of the different characters that they introduced to everything. It should have been not a reality, but it should have been an era-shifting moment, and it was just another kind of angle. That's ultimately what it amounted to. CM Punk's a big star now, and that was the benefit from it, but they didn't get as much as they could have out of that. And another one that they really dropped the ball in, and once again it comes back to just jumping the gun way too soon. And I often say one of the best build-ups I've ever seen. We can talk about how the match failed, and the match was horrible. Match was horrible, payoff sucked. But Sting versus Hogan at Starrcade, one of the best feuds ever. The build-up to that match over the course of a year was just fantastic, and a great show of patience from WCW in that aspect. And it shows what you can do if you just put the time and energy into something. And this is a feud that, Joe and Angle was an example of that, and this is a feud that I'm going to bring up. Matt Hardy and Edge in 2005. You had a match that was grounded in something that really happened. It was grounded in reality. This whole Lita cheated on Matt, and Matt got fired, and the whole crossfire and all that stuff. This is something that real people got invested in and kind of sunk their teeth into, and basically the WWE had the hottest storyline in wrestling just thrown up to them on a silver platter, and it should have been big. And again, it's one of those matches I'm thinking, build it to Mania. That could even be your title match, because Edge was the Money in the Bank at that point. That could have been a title match. If there was ever a time to make a main event star out of Matt Hardy, and I'm not Matt Hardy's biggest supporter, and I never really have seen what the big deal is with him, but if there was ever a time to do it and make a legit main event star out of him, that was the time to do it. And he knew it. Yeah, Matt knew how this angle needed to go. He was doing the Angelic Diablo on the Indies. It needed to be a Sting-Hogan type of feud with the heel constantly backpedaling, and he got over on the face initially, and then the face makes his return and is very mysterious, and mistake number one, I felt like they brought him back to the company too soon. Like, initially they had him jump Edge in the middle of the show, jump in through the crowd and just jump Edge. And I think that's something that they could have gotten a lot out of. I even had the idea of, at SummerSlam, Edge should have challenged him to show up in the crowd, and you could have gotten a brawl in the middle of the show rather than giving away the match. And I was at SummerSlam 05, and I can tell you with full honesty that match sucked. It was horrible the way they booked that match, and ultimately the way they booked the feud was to make Edge. It was meant to build up Edge for main event status, when what it should have done has been used to build up both stars and create a much more dynamic and interesting story. that could have been built up, for months and months and months. Because once again, I mean, this was a match that people wanted to see because people really got sucked into these real life events, and it could have turned into the hottest angle in wrestling. It should have been, and it was for like 2 minutes, but it, they just kind of fucked it up, and what else can you do? And again, going back to Edge, I mean, I still say to this day that he should have been the champion heading into WrestleMania 22, even after they fucked up the Matt Hardy thing. I mean, when he beat Cena for the belt, that was huge with the Money in the Bank cash-in, and they definitely should have run with that all the way to Mania. I mean, if you're going to have Cena win the belt back, at least do it at Mania, And they didn't get the most out of their heel in that situation. But, those are some of the big drop balls that really come to mind for me from both companies. I don't think you've seen the last of the Undertaker-esque characters. I think they're always going to try and recreate the Undertaker. And that goes for all wrestling companies. I mean, you're always going to see someone try and create that next big Undertaker character. I remember when TNA was doing Judas Messias. And, WCW had things like Seven and things like that. So, and WWE, they tried like a Kevin Thorne type of thing with vampires. And you're always going to see somebody try and recreate the success of The Undertaker. And but I think with the writing and the way it is and, the lack of freedom that's given to the talents nowadays, I don't think the character or that style of character is going to succeed in the way The Undertaker did, which is kind of unfortunate, but, that's really hard to pick a favorite angle since the Attitude Era, because so often, they'll start with a really good idea, and then ultimately it has a really bad payoff. I just talked about some of the drop balls that they've made. If I had to pick a favorite since the Attitude Era, though, I would probably go with Foley versus Orton. I really liked that feud in 2004, and I mean, it was just a great feud, and it really helped to solidify Randy Orton as one of the top guys in the company. And the promos were fantastic. The matches, building up to the matches were exciting, and you got a great payoff with that excellent hardcore match they had at Backlash 2004. It was everything put together very nicely, by the book, excellent angles all the way through, and then it burned off with an excellent match, and then Randy Orton goes over and gets the rub. It was just perfect writing, perfect execution, perfect everything. It was great. SmackDown in 2003 was the show that was typically filled with the better wrestlers. I remember, Benoit was on that show, Angle, Brock Lesnar, Rey Mysterio, the Guerreros, was Edge. I think Edge was out with his neck injury at that point. But basically, that was the more wrestling-centric show, and if you wanted really good matches, SmackDown was typically the better show to watch in compared to Raw. Undertaker was there as well, and he was having some of the best matches of his career. I remember he had a match with Angle on an episode of SmackDown that was just fucking fantastic. But so the match quality was overall good, but unfortunately it was centered around a lot of stupid angles, and a lot of them centered around Vince McMahon. And that was kind of the problem with SmackDown in 03, is that it kind of became the Vince McMahon show. And it got old, and it got boring, and some of the angles got really uncomfortable to watch, especially when he talked about deflowering his daughter through business deals or whatever. I mean, and then he wrestled. He actually had a match with Stephanie at a pay-per-view, and it was just so uncomfortable and creepy, and all I could sit there was thinking is like, I don't care about any of this. It's just so much extraneous bullshit that I just don't need. The Mr. America bullshit happened, which is one of the worst runs of Hogan's career. I mean, that was so just insulting and stupid. It's like, oh, we hired this masked man who's not Hogan, wink, wink. And it's like they're doing this whole mystery angle over a guy that we know is fucking Hogan. It just, I didn't fucking get it. It was stupid. And that was kind of the problem. That was basically the downfall of the whole show. SmackDown has certainly been worse. And like I said, there was good wrestling on the show. It was just unfortunate that Vince McMahon was the star of the show and kind of dragged the whole thing down. One match that I was really disappointed in was Bret the Hitman Hart versus The Undertaker at Royal Rumble 1996. This was a match that I was really excited for because I was a big fan of both guys. And to me, it was like the ultimate babyface match that you could do in 1996. It was like, oh my God, Undertaker's finally getting a title shot, and it's against Bret. Hello, this match is going to be awesome. And it wasn't. Maybe it's because they actually had to follow the Rumble match, and the crowd just couldn't get hyped up for it, but it was really boring. And really slow, and really uninteresting, and a far cry from their other matches. I mean, their SummerSlam match is fantastic, the one that they had in '97, and they had the match in the UK for the one night only pay-per-view. That was a fantastic match, but for some reason, this Royal Rumble match just didn't click, and wasn't a fan of it, and I'm still not a fan of it. One match that surpassed my expectations greatly was, excuse me. Hulk Hogan versus The Rock at WrestleMania 18. I didn't know what to expect out of that match. I knew I wanted to see it. I knew it was exciting and interesting just to have those two characters up against each other, but I didn't know what we were going to get out of Hogan. I didn't know how the crowd was going to react. I just went in there with absolutely no expectations. And by the time it was over, it was one of the most emotionally charged matches I've ever watched, and one of the best crowd reactions I've ever seen to anything. And it was such an exciting match because of it that I just fell in love with the match. It's actually gone down as one of my favorite Mania matches, just for the whole atmosphere and everything surrounding it, and just watching those two characters play off of each other. And it was a bit of a nostalgia run too. I got to see Hogan be Hogan again. It was pretty cool. I'll tell you what, if you can think of a worse one, I would love to hear it. I mean, when it comes to political satire, WWE is pretty bad. It certainly doesn't help. I mean, when you have that much programming in a week, one pay-per-view a month, it's really, really hard to fill that kind of content and keep the shows from being stale and too similar. I'm sure just having that much programming to fill really leads to a lot of things getting burned off way too quickly. And I do agree that is part of the problem. Basically, I will use a lot of the same tricks that a lot of promoters have used over the years. If he can't talk, give him a manager. If he can talk, give him tons of promo time. If he's limited in the ring, keep his matches to being squash matches, and don't have him wrestle all that much. Even in squash matches, keep his matches. See, part of the thing with Ryback and Goldberg as well is that they wrestled every single week, and I think, if you have him wrestle maybe twice a month, on TV, you maximize the amount of time that you can spend on him actually wrestling and get a lot more out of it. But yeah, just basically use all the tricks that, promoters have been using for years to help get, big guys over. So, I mean, it works for a reason, so, yeah. A lot of people would probably expect me to say Vicky Guerrero, or Michael Cole, or Jerry Lawler, or maybe even Mike Adamle. But no, I'm going to go for Todd Pettingill, who was an announcer and a non-wrestling personality that worked, with the WWF in the 90s. And, he participated a lot in shows like Live Wire, and he was a host of a lot of WWF shows, and he was featured heavily on the Coliseum videos when those would come out. And I can truly say that man could make anything cheesy. Like, I remember once he was on commentary for a Bret Hart versus Owen Hart match. And it's Bret Hart versus Owen Hart. I should be in heaven, right? His commentary was so bad and so cheesy and so ridiculous that it just ruined it. And quite honestly, I mean, he's a personality that'll make you hate wrestling. Like, if you watch a wrestling show that includes Todd Pettingill, you're going to sit there and think, wow, this sucks. I mean, he was that annoying, and I can't believe they kept him around as long as they did. I'm trying to think of how long he was there. And he was there until 97, and I think he came in, I want to say, 93, 94. So he was there for a few years, and he just, the best way I can describe it was just cheesy. It was like bad game show host. or bad television host, hosting a wrestling show, and it sounded awful. He was annoying. I groaned every time he came on television, and the shows became that much harder to watch whenever he was featured. So yeah, that's my answer. Good old Todd Pettingill. I think the single worst thing that happened to wrestling, period, not just the WWE, but the wrestling business as a whole, was when the WWE bought out WCW. That was the worst thing that ever happened to wrestling. And it's sad that WCW got to that point that it could be purchased under those circumstances. But, you're looking at mainstream wrestling. You've got two viable options. And if you're a wrestler in the business, you're thinking, okay, well, I've got two viable places to shoot for if I want to get work on a mainstream level. That instantly gets cut in half. So it, kills job opportunities, number one, which is, that's not, that, it makes it harder to find stars if half the positions are available, and I think the WWE became complacent. I think, the attitude and the things that they adopted during the Monday Night Wars era, that worked. And the type of passion that they brought, I think a lot of that kind of fell to the wayside once the war was over. And with nobody really challenging them, they just kind of got complacent, and they kind of, just adopted this new way of doing things that is very, what's the word I want to use? Well, it's what it is today, and that's that at best that brings mixed results. So yeah, I think losing WCW was just horrible for the business as a whole. The only good that came out of it really was the WWE's tape library, which, I mean, they've got the greatest tape library ever, and it makes for great DVD releases. But as far as I would gladly give up every single one of those DVD releases just to have a viable number two company to be on the WWE's level and make the wrestling business more exciting in general. Well, this is kind of a cheap answer, but I'm going to go with CM Punk. And it's not just because of his ability as a worker and his ability as a talker. It's the type of personality that he brings. I think he's the type of personality that I would want on a wrestling show. He strikes me as kind of a dick in real life. I mean, I just watched the CM Punk DVD, and he basically admits that, sometimes he can be a real prick. But, I would want to surround myself with, creative minds and guys that I can trust to kind of write their own things and take their character, and, not give them full creative control. But, if I pitch them an angle and a feud that I want to do, I need to put it in the hands of people that I can trust to kind of, do what they want with it and make the feud as interesting as possible, especially when it comes to promos. And that's why Cena, I wouldn't be as interested in somebody like him, because he strikes me as being reliant entirely on the WWE system. And, that's not how I would do things. And I think Punk is something that I would, definitely look for. And guys like that. And there are other guys like that. But yeah, I would definitely be more inclined to try and get somebody like a CM Punk to build my own company with. It's a really hard pick with so many rookie quarterbacks doing so well. You got Russell Wilson, you got RG3, who is like a god around here in the DC area. They're already calling him Black Jesus and things like that. And you get Andrew Luck over in Indianapolis, and all three of those quarterbacks are obviously doing really well. I would tend to, and not that I don't respect him, and I do. I think RG3 is great. But I'm going to disqualify him a little bit because Cousins came in and did really well when RG3 got hurt. So to me, that kind of, disqualifies him a little bit. I do take that stuff into account, but, I'm being nitpicky. But one guy, and I'm probably going to go with him, and he doesn't get nearly as much hype as RG3, Alfred Morris, the running back for the Redskins, who is but a huge part of that offense. And, you got to look at RG3 and Alfred Morris as being the best rookie duo in the NFL right now. I mean, they're just fantastic. And RG3, just having him in that offense provides so many different options of what to do. And Alfred Morris, I mean, he just runs over pretty much anybody he faces. So, Yeah, I tend to lean more towards, I'm going to throw the running back a bone and give it to not Russell Wilson, but Alfred Morris. I think he's done very well. But like I said, there have been a lot of rookies playing really well this year, and it's really fun to watch. What outfit change? How to do that? If you haven't been able to tell already, I've had to do this in multiple sittings, but we're getting there, almost done. Favorite Giant of all time? It's an answer that might shock people, but I'm going to say Mark Bavaro, who was a tight end for us in the 80s when we had a couple of our Super Bowl runs. He was actually on the team for both of our Super Bowl runs, the first one in 86 and the second one in 91 when we beat the Buffalo Bills. He didn't have a Hall of Fame career because I think a lot of injuries held him back from that, but when he was good, when he was at his peak, man, holy shit, he was awesome. I mean, he was a tight end that played with a defensive mindset of just search and destroy and hit hard, and there was nothing he couldn't do at that position when he was good, and before all the injuries really set in. I remember watching highlights of him dragging the 49ers across on that first down play. I remember hearing stories that he played with a broken jaw and had his jaw wired shut, and he looked like Sylvester Stallone, so he just looked cool from that aspect. And I wish I had been older. Because, the Giants, I was only a year old when the Giants won that Super Bowl. I wish I had been older and was around at the time of Mark Bavaro, because I would have loved it. Of course, I've seen it in highlights, and I'm just like, that guy is so awesome. But, yeah, I mean, I look at Mark Bavaro as, like, the type of player that I would love to have if I were building my own team. I just love him. Oh, yes, I love a lot of the NFL's original programming. I mean, NFL Films is just amazing, and, Steve Sabol, God rest his soul, he passed away this year. I mean, he really, through a lot of his techniques and putting together the documentaries and everything, really did make football cinematic. And a lot of the stuff that the NFL produces, the America's Game documentaries, for example, are just fantastic. I love the stuff that they produce. And, shows like the top 10 stuff, those are a lot of fun. It's always fun to kind of predict what's coming up and what's, how are they going to be ranked and everything. And if they go with something that I don't agree with, it's fun to just sit there and it's like, yeah, that's bullshit. You're totally wrong. But, those programs are a lot of fun, and I love it. The NFL, I mean, their original programming is just fantastic. It's very easy to say Peyton Manning or Tom Brady, living in this era, but personally, I kind of feel like it's so much easier to play quarterback nowadays, and I'm not trying to take anything away from them, I think Peyton Manning is one of the most individually gifted quarterbacks I've ever seen with the way he, I mean, you want to talk about, like, he's probably the smartest quarterback of all time. I'll say that. That definitely goes to Peyton Manning. But, with the penalties and the player safety things and a lot of these other rules that have come into play, it really does make it a lot easier to play quarterback in this league and to have, like, a really strong passing offense. So when guys like Drew Brees threw for 5,000 yards last year and, broke Marino's record and everything, I personally feel like Marino's is more impressive because he did it in an era when it was much tougher to play quarterback. I mean, for Marino to throw for over 5,000 in that era, it's like, wow, really? So I tend to look at those guys, and personally, if I had to pick a number one, and it's an easy answer, it's a simple answer, you don't have to be a football genius to even know this name, but Joe Montana. I think you want a guy that has a legitimate claim to being the greatest of all time to play quarterback. I think it's Montana, from his postseason success, the Super Bowl wins, the records he made, the way he played, his intelligence, the way he handled the position, how he was able to, go from the 49ers and play really well. I think it was with the Chiefs, so he wasn't just locked with one team. He proved he could play, which is what Peyton is doing now with the Denver Broncos. I got to go with Joe Montana. I think he's the best all around. No, I wasn't upset about it at all, because personally I think the Giants play better when nobody's paying attention to them. So, you want to take media attention from Tebow and put it all on the Jets and take attention away from the Giants, I'm totally fine with that. Going back to the sports curses thing, I just feel like the Giants play so much better when nobody believes in them, and it's really weird how that turns out, but it's the truth. And, this year we started sucking when they, so-called experts started saying that the Giants were the best team in the NFC. And once they started anointing us that, then right down the crapper. So I just got, even, week one, opening one, everybody picked the Giants to beat the Cowboys, and we got our asses kicked. So I've just kind of believed that, I like it better when nobody's talking about us, nobody's paying attention to us, and nobody believes that we can win, because that's when the Giants seem to play their best football. So, I mean, if the Jets want to, obviously I don't think Tebow's going to stay there. I think that's pretty obvious at this point. But, they want to make those kind of hires and take attention from us and put it on them. Hey, more power to you. I don't care. This is like, all I want to do is win. I don't care if the media's paying attention to us or not. I think the easy answer to go with, you're looking at the 6 teams in it, I got to go with the Patriots. I think they're just a model of efficiency right now. I think they're the most consistent team. Denver, a lot of people are going to go with. I feel like they haven't really been battle-tested. And, it's really cool that Peyton's done as well as he has, and to make this kind of comeback is great. But I feel like Denver's kind of had an easy schedule, especially being in that shitty division. So I don't think they're really battle-tested. And I think I think the Patriots might outmatch them. The Texans have gotten cold lately. The Ravens haven't looked that good. The only game where the Ravens looked really good was against us, and I think that's because we, sucked. I think that had a lot to do with that. The Bengals I'm not overly impressed with. I think the Colts might be a surprise. They seem to be playing with a lot of emotion and have a lot of momentum right now. So I wouldn't be surprised if they won. I wouldn't be surprised if any of the teams, really, except for maybe the Bengals, I wouldn't be surprised if any of them ended up winning the AFC. I mean, once the playoffs start, everyone's 0-0 anyway. But if I had to guess and if I had to bet money on it, I would go with the Patriots. Nah, I haven't. Sorry. I remember when I first started seeing previews for Batman Beyond, and I thought it was going to be a disaster. Of course, I had lived through the 90s where they kept trying to update old things, and, I remember when G.I. Joe Extreme came out, and, that sucked. I remember the Extreme Ghostbusters, or whatever that was, where it was a whole new crew of Ghostbusters with Egon as the, the mentor in charge, and that sucked. There were a lot of those type of revivals, and Batman Beyond just looked like another one of those. It's like, really, a Batman show where Bruce Wayne doesn't play Batman? Come on. I mean, that's fucking stupid. It just looked like it was like Batman 2000, because that was a big thing. And if it wasn't Extreme, it was 2000. And it just looked like it was going to be one of those things. Much to my surprise, it was pretty good. I liked Terry McGinnis. I really liked him as Batman. I liked his relationship with Bruce. I liked a lot of the villains that they came up with. I liked the visual style for the show. I thought it was pretty good. There were a couple of things, because it was teenagers. Batman was a teenager that, sometimes it worked in the same way that Buffy the Vampire Slayer worked, and other times some of the teenage bullshit resulted in some stupid stories. But overall, I thought it was pretty good. And whenever they revisited Batman's past, like there was a Ra's al Ghul episode and a Bane episode and a Mr. Freeze episode, it was really awesome. And they did a few things with Terry, especially with some of the new villains that they cooked up, that were really, really good. So overall, I actually kind of enjoyed Batman Beyond. I thought it was good. Well, obviously, I just talked about Batman Beyond. I think the Batman Beyond movie is really good. Return of the Joker, I thought that was great. What other ones? There was one with Mr. Freeze called Sub-Zero that came out at around the same time as Batman and Robin, and it was really sad that a direct-to-video cartoon was better than the big-budget live-action movie, but it was a lot better and did a much better job of capturing the tragedy of Mr. Freeze. I'm trying to think of some of the other ones I've seen. Under the Red Hood, which came out a few years ago, I saw that, really enjoyed it. I just saw Return of the Dark Knight, I think it's called. I'm getting my graphic novels mixed up. It's the one that was based off the Frank Miller comic. The Dark Knight Returns, that's the name of it. Okay, Dark Knight Returns Part 1. Saw it. I thought it was pretty good. It's basically the graphic novel. So if you've read the graphic novel, you've basically seen the movie. But it was pretty good. I enjoyed it. I'm trying to think of some other ones. I hated The Batman, that animated show. I thought it kind of took everything that was cool about the 90s animated series and just threw it into the garbage can, and it was just really stupid. But I have to say, Batman vs. Dracula was pretty entertaining. I have to say, it's like that movie, it was so weird and so out there that I did kind of enjoy it. I'm trying to think of some other ones. I'm sure they're out there, but overall, I typically enjoy the Batman animated films. I keep hoping they'll do a long Halloween one. I would love it if they did that one, but as it stands, we've had some pretty good animated Batman movies. Typically, no, I don't. And it's really weird. Basketball is the one sport where I typically, I actually always, I get more excited over college basketball than I do the pros. Especially when March Madness rolls around. I got to get sucked into that. But I don't know, I don't know what it is. And NBA just never really got that attached to it. I was a Michael Jordan fan as a kid, but other than that, I just never really got attached to it. And I think a lot of it might have to do with the fact that my dad, his alma mater is Wake Forest, and it gives me somebody to root for in college basketball. In the NBA, I've never really attached myself to a team, so it's really strange. But yeah, I'm just not much of an NBA fan. It's weird. Well, it was really weird. I was out of town, and I was in Philadelphia, and the hotel I was staying at was really nice, and I had a good time and everything. But I don't know, the people next door to me, and I'm going to say people, there were at least 5 guys, and they all looked like Vanilla Ice, and they all shared the same room, and there were raucous parties going on in that hallway, in that hotel room, almost every night I was there, and it was really strange to watch a bunch of Vanilla Ice lookalikes, share the same room and party. And of course, I'm sitting there in my hotel room, just relaxing from what I was doing earlier that day, and just thinking, go Ninja, go, or Ice, Ice, baby. And I've just got all these Vanilla Ice tunes stuck in my head while they're all over there partying, doing God knows what. I didn't dare go. It's like, I do not want to know what's going on in a room full of Vanilla Ice lookalikes. So, it was strange. I'll say that. This is going to sound harsh, but I don't really care all that much. I kind of feel like the streak has kind of played itself out to where, he's not going to lose. It's not going to happen. So it's really kind of hard to get invested into it, especially since he's wrestled, almost everybody that you would want him to, except for Sting, but that's not a possibility. So, it's really hard to really say who I'd want him to face because I truly don't care all that much. So, I guess if I had to pick, probably The Rock, because that would be something different, if nothing else. But, Well, I think Daniel Bryan will be featured on TV as long as they keep finding things for him to shout and for the crowd to chant and yell at him. As for him being like an established main eventer, like one of the top guys in the company, like, a really, really big marquee guy that they can really center around for big main events, I say give it a few years and see where we are. It takes at least a few years to get somebody to that point anyway, so we'll see. Not often, and not as much as I used to when I was younger. At this point, all I play really are just Mario, Zelda, and Madden, which is why I have a Wii. That's really the sole purpose of me having a Wii. So it's like, well, I would like to continue with Mario, Zelda, and Madden, and that's the one system that allows me to do all 3. So, but as far as like into hardcore gaming, like Halo and a lot of the other games that go on nowadays, all of them kids and what they're playing nowadays, I'm not as into it. It's kind of passed me by, I feel. Right now, they'd probably be retired. I can't imagine them still wrestling at this point, even if they, had survived and what happened to them didn't. Personally, I feel like if Brian Pillman and Owen Hart were still alive today, they'd probably be retired now. I can't picture them still wrestling at this point. Some people think that Owen would have become world champion. I don't. I think the time, all indications to me seem that he was getting ready to retire anyway. Brian Pillman, great performer. Both him and Owen are great performers, but, becoming world champion, main eventer, that type of stuff, I don't think it was in the cards for them, so I don't think they would have had long main event runs or anything. So, they probably would have made their money, done well, and retired, and would be retired today had they not, tragically been taken from us, so. I would say both. I think hardcore wrestling has its place, and I think it's it sparked creativity for a lot of people, and a lot of people did get creative with hardcore wrestling. I think it provides a lot of different things to do. But at the same time, I think a lot of people use it as a crutch to make up for their shortcomings, and they don't really hone their craft as well. They just go out there and start smacking each other with light tubes, and you wind up with guys like Necro Butcher, who I'm not very high on, if you can't tell. So, it's had its positives and its negatives. It's really weird. When I was a kid, I remember every time they would bring in a new guy, they would, hype him up with vignettes and interviews and stuff, and they could make you believe that a guy like Papa Shango would come in and was going to be a contender for the World Heavyweight title. That's how much they would, put promotion into these new characters and these new talents. And, sometimes they would pan out and other times they wouldn't. But to me, though, it's like you introduce them. If you want to introduce a new talent, it would make sense to me to give them a huge spark right away, and not push them to the world title right away, but give them something big right off the bat to see if this talent and this character can sink or swim within the company. And then after that program's done, go wherever you want to go from there. But I do think it's better than just introducing a guy as a loser and then trying to overcome the label of being kind of the low-card jobber guy and then building them up to that point. I think it would make more sense to bring in a guy and try to make us believe that he's really, really good rather than, telling us right off the bat that he sucks. And then if you want to push him later, try undoing that and telling us that he doesn't suck. But, I hope that makes sense. I kind of rambled there, but, whatever.